Welcome to You Are Not a Frog, the podcast for GPs, doctors and other professionals in high-stress jobs. Working in today's pressured environment, you may feel like a frog in boiling water. Things have heated up so slowly that you might not have noticed the extra long days becoming the norm. You've got used to feeling constantly busy and often one crisis away from not coping. Let's face it, frogs only have two options: to stay in the pan, be boiled alive, or to hop out and leave. But you are not a frog, and that's where this podcast comes in. You can do more than just hop out or burn out. There are simple changes that you can make which will make a huge difference to your stress levels and help you enjoy life again. I'm your host, Dr Rachel Morris, GP, turned executive coach, speaker, specialist in workplace resilience and creator of the Shapes Toolkit training programme. In the podcast, I'll be chatting with friends, colleagues and experts, all who have an interesting take on this stuff, so that together we can take back control and thrive. If you want more resources, including CPD reflection forms for the podcast, then make sure you've signed up to the You Are Not a Frog Collective, and please share these podcasts with anyone who needs them. On with the episode. It's brilliant to have with me on the podcast today Dr Giles P Croft. Now, Giles is a medical doctor, originally trained as a surgeon, and now he works with individuals and groups to help them better understand why they think, feel and behave as they do. Giles, is that an accurate description of what you do?
Yeah, it's a little bit difficult to put into a pithy little sentence, but when I left clinical practice years ago, about 16, 17 years ago now, I went off and had various different career adventures, things outside of medicine, and was always really drawn to what made people tick. Really kind of drawn to I intercalated, did a psychology degree, was fascinated by all that. So I've just kind of like got pulled back into that really. So how we experience the world and how understanding it better can help us to have a better experience of it.
So what does that mean you do on a sort of day-to-day basis?
So I do one-to-one work with people, and whether that's over Zoom or I live on the edge of the Brecon Beacons, so I do a fair bit. I do like walk and talks with people. So we go out into the hills, which is a great place to sort of get down out of our habitual thinking and back into real life. And I run courses. I do a regular drop-in streamed session called Wellbeing Wednesdays. Seem to spend an inordinate amount of time online, as we all do these days.
Yeah, it's a thing, isn't it? We talk about virtual fatigue and all that. Yeah, so I thought it'd be really good to have you on for my listeners, because this podcast is all about resilience. It's all about the small changes that we can make to make life better and to help us thrive without having to leave the jobs that we're already in. And many of us are professionals working high stress jobs. We have a lot of doctors, a lot of managers, people in law, accountancy, all those sorts of professions where actually we trained for so long to be in this profession, and we don't want to have to leave, but we've got this sneaking suspicion that life isn't quite as it should be. And many of us are feeling quite burnt out. And I guess particularly as we're coming out of lockdown, as life is beginning to return, I would say, to normal, but it's not normal. It's not normal at all. It's so different. I mean, what's your experience been of lockdown and coronavirus and all that?
Well, it's I think it's been a real, certainly in the work that I do, which is pointing people back to their innate resilience, pointing people back to their innate health, to the fact that we have this sort of almost default state of peace of mind and calm and secure and happy and healthy, and it's pointing people back to that. And so I think we're going to get through to the other side, and we're all going to have like tons of evidence of that in ourselves, because we'll be able to look back and we'll be able to think, well, hang on a minute, that was a pretty terrible time. There was a whole load of stuff that happened, and if you told me in advance what was going to happen, I'd have lost my mind. I'd have been like, I'd have been running around like a headless chicken, and I'd have thought, there's no way I'm going to be able to cope with that. And yet here I am, and I'm here in another moment, and life goes on, and I'm okay. And so I think it's a real opportunity for people to really see just how resilient they are, and to see that there's nothing that they really need to do to experience that. That there's no, they don't have to like add anything. As humans, this is the great thing. As humans, we come into the world with it all. It doesn't get taken away from us. It just kind of like gets covered up. And for me, the work that I do is helping people to see through all of the thinking and the beliefs that we have that covers up that very natural state of health and happiness.
I'm really interested in this idea of our default setting. And I'd never really thought of that, before. And there's a very funny video on Facebook of someone who going back to tell them their pre-lockdown selves what they need to get, you should get a dog. Don't worry about the gym. You're going to watch lots of Netflix. It's going to be fine. But, if we had known this was coming, we'd really panicked. It would have been, we'd had a countdown to the day, wouldn't we? And would have been like, what have you done to prepare for lockdown? And lots of people have got very stressed about it, a lot of anxiety about it. It happened. Yeah. And yes, it's not been great. And lots of people have had some real traumas and troubles and stuff, but actually we are all okay. And we've coped and we've survived.
Isn't that the nub of it? I mean, I'm reminded just hearing you speak then of that, when they broadcast the H.G. Wells War of the Worlds thing on the radio. When War of the Worlds was written and it first went out as a radio show. And people were running, they heard it on the radio, but it was broadcast as if it were actually happening. And people were running down to Horsley Common where it's set with guns and pickaxes and
really,
because and it wasn't even happening. And if that ain't a metaphor for how we live our lives, I don't know what is. We create a bunch of stories about how life is, and we act as if those stories are real, and they're simply not. And the more that people can see through that, the more that they live with ease and peace of mind.
Yeah, that's very true. I often in my training, when I'm talking about our threat detection response, we're often, unfortunately, not responding to actual threats, but responding to perceived threats, and we're pre-living this stuff that's never actually happened. So a lot of our anxiety and stress is to do with what might happen in the future, what's going to happen if this happens and if that happens. And actually the truth is nobody knows what's going to happen in the future, and you can never. I have this mantra that the things that you worry about never happen. It's the things that you don't worry about that's what comes and blindsides you in life. Certainly in my life, the most traumatic things happen to me. Stuff I would never have predicted would happen. I think those are probably stories for another day, but
and again we get through
dramatic
them.
Ones.
We get through them. This is the funny thing about being human, is we've got all the evidence of this right under our noses, and yet we still fall for the illusion, thinking that our belief systems and our thinking is more real than it actually is.
So tell me a little bit more about this default state that we're in. So you believe that our default state is to be at peace and to be happy. Is that right?
Yeah. And look, we've all experienced this. It's because it's now. There's no getting away from the fact that it's now, that life is happening now. There's nothing else. Like the future, that's a concept. That's a thought in our heads that's happening now. And when the future arrives, like if I think, 3 p.m. tomorrow, well, when 3 p.m. tomorrow arrives, well, it's no longer the future, it's now. And so, which is why there've been, dozens and dozens of books written about the present moment. And, all throughout the history of time, people have been, all the sages have said how important it is to live in the present moment. But it's not so much about trying to be more present. It's really seeing insightfully that actually there isn't anything else. And so those fears that we have about the future that really look, it's such a brilliant illusion. They really look like they're giving us a whole bunch of information about what may or may not happen in the future. But the future is an imagination that's happening right now. So they can't be telling us about the future. All those feelings can be telling us about is what's actually going on in our heads right now. And to really experience that default setting is that happens in a present moment, because that's all there is, with a quiet mind, and kind of like seeing through the illusion just seems to, from what I've experienced myself and working with clients and stuff, seeing through that illusion, really getting it in your bones that we're walking around in this kind of like, almost like all in our little separate realities, or all our little internal sort of almost like virtual realities that we're walking around in. The more that we can see through that, the quieter that thinking gets, the quieter all of the chattery minds that we're so used to, that we don't notice half the time, because it's so omnipresent, it's there all the time, and it's got our voice. It's like, which isn't helpful. It's in our voice, so it really seems like us. So when that chatter dies away, when we see through that for what it is, which is just chatter, well, that's when we come back to the present moment. And we've all experienced it. We've all experienced it in totally different situations. We might experience it looking at an amazing sunset, but then similarly, we might also experience it in the middle of a crash call, when we're so in the flow that we've not engaged our analytical mind at all. We're just in the flow of life. We're in that present moment. And that's when we can feel supremely calm in some of the most, what externally looks like a really stressful situation.
So you're saying that our stress is almost 100% caused by what we're imagining might happen in the future, rather than what's actually happening now?
Yeah. Anytime we take ourselves out of the present moment to think about the past or the future, or how we are, or what this means for me, or any time we take ourselves out of the present moment, well, it's like the feelings that we have. This is the beauty of feelings for me, is that they're gently pointing us back to that, saying, no, whoa there, Giles, you're getting this feeling of fear about the future, because that's a story, mate. And this is the beauty of feelings. So this is when all of a sudden you start seeing these what we classically think of as unhelpful feelings are actually really helpful, because they're just gently pointing us to the fact that we're no longer in reality, which is now right under our nose. We're off in a story. Stories aren't real.
So I'd like to offer you a yes but here. Stories aren't real, but you do need to plan. And you do need to respond to your experience. I'm just thinking of being a GP, when actually, for safety netting, to make sure the patient stays safe, you need to worry. You need to think, oh, but what might happen in the future? And here's what to do if this happens. And if this, so isn't worrying quite wise? Does that not keep us and everyone else safe?
Short answer, no. And planning is necessary. Planning is, planning is good. Planning is something we've all, and hell, squirrels plan, don't they? they collect nuts so it's it's a thing, all right? It's planning. So long as we see that, and it's an amazing ability that we have as humans to be able to project our thinking into the future and make a best guess on probability, and then make some decisions in the present moment about that. Now, there's a difference between that and worrying about something in the future, though. There's a big difference. And what I've seen with clients is that the more they see the truth of what's going on, it's like, yeah, it's fine to predict. Like, if I want to go on holiday, for instance, if I want to go and stay in France somewhere, it absolutely makes sense for me to not just turn up at the ferry and hope that I can get on. It makes sense to book a ticket. And similarly with accommodation. But if I use that tool to kind of like create a bunch of scenarios about what that holiday is going to be like, and how I'm going to feel when I'm on that holiday, then I'm using the wrong tool for the job entirely. And actually, the last holiday that I had more fun planning it than I did have when I was on it.
Oh dear. I'm not going to ask you where you went.
So yeah, planning's fine, but planning happens now. Planning happens now, and all we're doing is we're making a guess on probability of, I can pretty much guarantee that the sun's going to rise tomorrow, but I can't tell you what I'm going to be thinking or feeling in 5 minutes time. And so any plans that I make on the basis of that they fall into the worrying category, and they're not helpful.
What if you've had an experience in the past? So if you've maybe had an experience with someone, they're very difficult, you've got to go and have a difficult conversation with them, give them some feedback, and you know that they're going to be tricky again, and it might be really awkward. Where does that? I mean, that's quite. I wonder whether our amygdala, our threat detection system, is sort of set up to warn us about that, to help us. Well, I guess it's to change our behaviour, and I guess I'm talking myself out of this as I speak. The amygdala is there to change your behaviour in the present, isn't it? To be able to plan and change it, rather than to think, oh, what if? Yeah.
So that difficult conversation that you're going to, you've got a future component and a past component to that, and you've got a future component. Oh, it's happening in half an hour. So you can spend time living in the story of what that might go like. Now, you've got with the best will in the world, even if you think you know what that conversation's going to go like, you don't know what that conversation's going to go like. The more you go into a conversation expecting it to go a particular way, chances are it's probably going to go a bit more that way, because again, it's your behavior is predicated on the thinking and the feelings that you have. So if you go in there with no agenda, and you go in with an open heart, and really listen without expectation, without judgment, without the other person needing to be any particular way, well, the kind of experiences that we have then are very different from when we go in with a whole load of our own thinking and our expectations.
So how do we get into the state where we can be like that? Because I think a lot of us, we're in such busy jobs, we're going from one thing to another, to another, to another. How do you get this? You talked about a quiet mind, which would be lovely. I guess that takes practice, doesn't it? But a lot of us are just so busy, haven't really got a lot of headspace to think about stuff. And so I guess we are constantly living in the past or the future. And to me, for some people, it does seem like quite an effort to get them into that sort of present state where they have got a quiet mind, where they can be completely present and empathetic and listen.
Yeah, I often think that the worst thing that can happen to somebody is to find something that works for them. Is to find a little technique that works for them, that helps to center them. Because the minute we do that, the minute we start attaching to coping mechanisms, well, then we're no good without them. And we've lost sight of the fact that we have a psychological immune system. We're homeostatic beings. Every single organ system in our body is operating around a mean, and that includes our psychology. That includes our moods. And the more that we see that, the more we can stop fiddling around with it and let it go. And you say, how can we have a quieter mind? Is to get out of the way of our inbuilt human system doing that for us. There's a reason that we say sleep on it. There's a reason that deep down we know that when we're in a filthy mood, it's not a good idea to send text messages. It's not a good idea to actually hit send on that email that we've splurged out. There's something that holds us back. That's our human operating system. That's our wisdom saying, you are not seeing things clearly right now. Give it time. You'll settle down. And we wake up the next morning, and material reality, what's actually going on, the situation hasn't changed one iota. and yet we've got a completely different perspective on it, and we don't need to do anything. And the more that we see there's nothing to do, the more easily we let go of all the thinking. We let go of the need to manage our feelings. We let go of the need to manage our thoughts, because they don't need managing. They're harmless and they settle themselves.
So rather than trying to do anything, it's sort of a recognition that they are existing, they're there. And so it's more about ignoring, is it?
Yeah,
Or
it's
letting
like
go?
it's like you can have you can have a particular train of thought, and you can choose to take that to the nth degree. You can jump on that train and you can follow it where it's going. That's free will. That's the choice. And if it looks like us that's going to be helpful. And this is the thing when we get into habits and things like that, because it really looks like it's like, well, if I perform this little routine 5 times in a row, then my child doesn't get hurt. Oh, therefore it must be. We set up this little pattern in our heads. Therefore it must be, and that's not true. And so we can jump on those trains of thought, but the more that we understand that we're just experiencing life in thought, moment to moment to moment, and it can't hurt us, and that our felt experience of life is a reflection of the state of mind that we're in any given moment, well, it just doesn't make sense to keep jumping on that train of thought and following it, because it's not really going to do us any good.
So what can we practically do though? Say if I like the the example you gave of being in a foul mood and not saying
Yeah.
sending emails and texts. There are lots of things that are conspiring to put us in a foul mood, or as I would be talking about, triggering us into the corner where our amygdala flares up. And sometimes I just feel like I'm in a really bad mood, and I start searching around for what caused that, and why am I feeling that, and what's the problem. So you're saying that actually we should just completely ignore that?
Don't do that. Yeah. Well, again, you're just creating a story. If I wake up in the morning and I'm feeling overwhelmed, which can happen, then it's like I've got a pair of overwhelmed goggles on, and everywhere I look, everything's going to be overwhelming. This has happened. First person I speak to, my wife, the first thing that she asks me, I'm just completely overwhelmed by it, and I snap at her. And I go into my office and I look at my desk, and my desk is strewn with papers, and I look at it and I'm like massively overwhelmed by all of it. I've got like this horrible overwhelmed feeling. Now, if I misattribute that feeling of overwhelm to my desk or to my wife or to my daughter or to the washing up downstairs or something, then I'm not seeing it clearly, because 6 hours previously, when I left my desk in exactly the same state that it was in beforehand, when I was feeling overwhelmed, I was feeling inspired. I was feeling on it. I didn't want to tear myself away from the desk at all, because my felt experience any moment is coming from my thinking. It's not coming from my circumstances. And so the being aware of that is enough. Being aware of that is enough, because again, it just doesn't make sense for me to keep hanging on to that false notion that my sense of overwhelm is coming from my desk and all the papers on it.
Mm-hmm. So being aware of what you're thinking and what you're feeling, and feeling is just a really good sort of litmus test of what's going on with your thinking, I guess, as well.
Exactly. Absolutely reliable. It's like a little light on the dashboard that comes. It's got one job and one job only, and that job is to tell us about the quality of our thinking in that moment.
Oh, I like that. So your feelings are like a light on a dashboard that tell you about what your thoughts are doing to you at the moment. Yeah. What do you think of the idea that your feelings point you towards your needs? Because I know I've talked a lot. There was a podcast I've just done with Shani Langdon talking about ACT therapy, which I'm quite a big fan of. The fact that again, it's very much like you don't need to choose whether to fuse with your thoughts or not. Your feelings, you can accept your feelings, you don't need to fight them, but they're quite a good indication of what you need. And then you can then make changes going forward. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so as well as as well as our happiness and our peace of mind and not getting caught up in our thinking and all the good stuff that comes with that, well, we find other things in that space as well. And those other things are our creativity, and there are intuition, and we'll always be doing what makes sense to us in any given moment. So if I feel thirsty, that's a need, I guess. I'll have a feeling of thirst. Well, there's an awareness there that I'm thirsty. I can choose to go and get a cup of water or not. I think where things get more complicated is when we don't see that we're maybe in the middle of a story, and that the feelings are coming from all of that thinking that we've got, because feeling is thought, thought is feeling, as opposed to I like to call it the quiet flute in the orchestra of intuition. And that intuitive voice, for me, was the way into all of this, because I did all these different career changes, and leaving medicine and going off and working for a cycling magazine and opening a shop with my wife, and I've always been led by that intuitive voice of ignoring the chatter, of ignoring all of the buts, of ignoring the narrative, and really going with what feels right. So yeah, I think I'm very in touch with that concept of our feelings telling us about our needs, so long as we've kind of like identified whether or not we're just stuck in a whole bunch of repetitive thinking about something.
Yeah, because I think you're right. There is a danger that you're feeling something and you think your feelings are the truth. So I'm a big culprit in this. I feel something and it's like, I've got to change something, where I live, my job, but this, actually, I'm just hungry. Or there's just something's niggling me about something, I'm not quite sure about it, and it's going on at me, and then I've solved it, like, oh no, life is okay again. Wasn't that after all.
It's amazing, isn't it, how when we're in a low mood, everything seems really urgent. When we're in a low mood, it really looks like we need to do something. And for me, the biggest difference that in anyone's life that they can see is to see what those feelings are telling them. That those feelings aren't telling them to act. Those feelings are telling them to not act. Those feelings are telling them to wait until their thinking settles, until their mood settles, and they're seeing life more clearly, and then act. Nothing good comes out of acting in a low mood.
Yeah, so don't make any decision on an empty stomach. Don't make any decision when you've got when you're having a really low mood, because probably your judgment's going to be clouded.
Yeah, totally.
So what would you say to someone, so a lot of my listeners are doctors, other professionals in really high stress jobs. Say if they've made a really high stakes mistake and there's a complaint come in, like, that is pretty much one of the most stressful things I think can happen. What would you say to them? What could they do? How could you help them? Because that just, in my own experience, it overwhelms your thinking and your feeling for days, weeks, and even months.
Yes, I get it. Yeah, I mean, and this isn't to say that difficult circumstances don't arise. Of course, difficult circumstances arise. Now, there's, you can go down two paths with that. There's you can accept what's happened. You can accept that, there's likely some more stuff that's going to happen in the future. However, my experience of all of that is happening now, and all of that is happening in thought. And again, there's a train of thought here. You can very, very easily jump on a train of thought, but we know instinctively, we know when something is, when we do really need to act on something, and we know when we're just, endlessly worrying about something. I'm sure we've all had that experience where we've got a problem that we want to solve, and we're thinking about it, and we've almost got, it's like it's on the tip of our tongue, and we honestly think, if I just put a bit more effort into thinking about this, I'm going to come up with the solution. And it never happens. And when it does happen is when we're in the shower, or we're playing with our kids or something, and we've stopped thinking about it, and then the solution comes. It's just about knowing the right tool for the job, really. So, yeah, circumstances happen. I think understanding what circumstances are, seeing the gap between circumstances and how we think, or seeing the missing link. I mean, the missing link is thought. Seeing that it's not the situation that's scaring us, is what we think about the situation that's actually scaring us. That's where our feelings are coming from.
Yeah,
and that applies to any circumstance.
Yeah, I guess. And what stories in your head you're telling yourself. A lot of my work is helping people understand those stories that we just, and I guess with a complaint or a mistake, yes, it's happened, and yes, there may be some consequences, but often we've increased our own suffering so much because of the stuff we're telling ourselves, like, I shouldn't have done that, and a good doctor would never have done that, or a good lawyer would have spotted that, and I'm a terrible person, and they're going to think I'm a terrible person, and I'm never going to work again, and all this sort of stuff. And actually, the truth of the matter is, everyone makes mistakes. It could have happened to anybody. You try your best. You don't always know what the best course of action is.
And you've
learned from it. Yeah. I think that's what we miss out on with our thinking, is the learning that can occur in all of this, rather than thinking, we spend a lot of time beating ourselves up and thinking, I shouldn't have done that, or it's really dreadful, rather than thinking, wow, what a useful learning experience. I now know how not to do that again.
And again, the mechanism of that isn't to kind of like to try and do that. It's not to try and reframe it, because trying to reframe something, that's just adding a whole bunch more thinking on top of a thinking problem. So those moments of learning come with a quiet mind. Those moments of learning come with reflection. Those moments of learning come when we fall out of our habitual thinking, when we fall out of the stories and we're doing something completely unrelated, and we'll have a conversation with something about something that's totally unrelated, and all of a sudden we'll have that insight. We'll be like, oh yeah, that situation, that mistake I made, yes. And we have a new thought about it. We have an insight about it. And that's where we change. That's when we get a different perspective on the whole situation. It doesn't happen from actively thinking about it.
That's interesting. So I think I completely get that when you're distracted, when you're doing something different, that's when your brain starts thinking really creatively, problem solving. You're not conscious of it. Do you think that there's no role in active reflection then, in thinking, actually, what's the truth here, and how can I reframe? Because I think for some of my clients that has actually been quite helpful.
I think, again, it's seeing the underlying operating system. It's seeing how it works. Now, on top of that, there's a whole load of tools and techniques that will work in inverted commas really well. Now, whether they're 100% reliable for somebody is another thing entirely. Like I know if I'm in a foul mood, it's a really good idea to get out on my bike. It's a really good idea to get out on my bike. And I'll come back and I'll feel a lot better, but not always. So it's not the cycling that's doing it. So the cycling is doing something. Now the cycling is actually calming my thinking about it. The cycling is getting me out of the stories in my head, getting me back into my heart, getting me back into the present moment. And that's what it's doing. As soon as I attach my well-being to the cycling, as soon as I attach my peace of mind to the cycling, again, I've set up another story that's not actually true. Okay.
And then you feel disappointed if you haven't got out of the bad mood for the cycling, because it's always worked in the past. Why is it not working now?
Exactly.
That's quite difficult though, isn't it? To just be relying on things just to go back to default by norm, without being able to do anything about it. Because as doctors and professionals, we're used to taking action to make things better.
I know. And I think that seeing how it works, seeing the operators, seeing that these are principles, this isn't like a technique or anything. This is just like, well, this seems to be how we work, really. We're built for the present moment. That's what we're actually built for. Means that we know that we don't have to do anything. We don't have to do the cycling, just like we don't have to do meditation, or we don't have to do yoga. We don't have to have a beer. We don't have to go shop. We don't have to do a whole bunch of online shopping to make us feel better. Now, does that mean that we're not going to do any of those things and we're just going to sit, in a cave cross-legged chanting? No, but it means that, again, we're more in tune with our intuitive voice. We're more in tune with the soft flute. We're more in tune with I've got an urge to put on that particular song. And we put that particular song on, and 5 minutes later we've come out of our bad mood, or I've just got this real urge to just throw myself into cooking or something. Now, when you see what all of those things are doing, when you see that music and cooking and meditation and exercise and drinking heavily and taking drugs and shopping and gambling, when you see that all of those are working in exactly the same way to calm our thinking down, well, that's when you're free from them. That's when you're free from them, because we've got it all going on for us already. We don't need any of those things. We might just need a good night's sleep. We might just need a fresh perspective on it. And that's built in.
So asking yourself, what is it that I need now?
Yeah.
Or what's the next best action that I could do now? And listen. I like that idea of your intuition being that soft flute that you can listen to. So I know exactly that when I'm in a really bad mood, getting out on my bike is, 9 times out of 10 be absolutely brilliant, will really help. But actually, if my intuition is saying, actually, you just need to sit down, listen to some music, probably better to listen to that than flogging myself on the bike. I think it can be quite difficult. I'm just reminded of, there's a really good comedy sketch. It's really ancient. I'll see if I can find the link to it. It's this old American comedian, and he's pretending to be a psychiatrist, and this woman comes in. You seen it? Stop it.
Hilarious.
Can you remember his name? Lady comes in to see him, sits at the desk and goes, "Doctor, I just can't stop thinking about my intrusive thoughts that are coming in." And he just goes, "Well, stop it." And she goes, "Oh, and the other thing is, Doctor, I just keep going out with really unsuitable men." And he goes, "Stop it." And she says, "And I can't stop eating all this chocolate." And he just goes, "Stop it." And it's very funny. But sometimes I think advice can be just like us sitting there going, "Well, just stop it." So how can we translate this into, because I think there's some absolute gold nuggets here. But for people that are used to being action orientated, how can we get them out of the thought that we're just telling them to stop it?
Maybe it's to see that we need to stop it with the action orientated stuff.
Ooh, that's getting very meta now.
Well,
Giles.
it's just looking further upstream, isn't it? It's like, it's seeing how it works. It's just seeing how it works. It's like we do it so that we're always doing what makes sense to us. We're always doing what makes sense to us. Now, we can try and change our circumstances in order to feel a particular way. It doesn't work like that. Sorry, guys, but feelings don't come from outside of you; they come from inside of you. So you're on. It's a fool's errand, that one. We can try and change things, or we can look further upstream. We can look to how our human operating system works, and we can have insights about that. Then we don't need to change. Like, for instance, if my daughter's room next door here. So if she's scared of a shadow on the wall, okay, and she says, "Daddy, I want you to make the monster go away," you're a parent. What are you going to do? You're going to show her that it's just a shadow, aren't you? You're not going to go in there and say, "Okay, right, so here's something that you could do to stop you from being scared of that monster. Here's another thing that you could do to stop you from being scared of that monster." You show her that it's a trick of the mind. You show her that it's a trick of the mind, and then she doesn't need any coping mechanisms, because she's seen through the illusion. She's seen through the illusion. So all of the coping mechanisms, that if we think that it's the coping mechanism that's helping us, then all we're doing is we're reinforcing the illusion. We're reinforcing the illusion that there's something to cope with, when there's not. It's a trick of the mind.
Yeah, that's a really good illustration of that. So practically, I always like to finish my podcast with asking people what 3 top tips they've got. So without wanting to be too action orientated, okay, what 3 things would you like people to take away from this that you think would, been really influential for you?
Ask yourself this question: where do I think my feelings are coming from right now? Mm-hmm. In any situation. If the answer comes back as anything but thought in the moment, it's wrong. Look at your hands regularly. Remind yourself that your hands are on the ends of your arms, so they're always with you. Remind yourself that your hands are always in the present moment. You can't scratch your nose 5 minutes from now, and you can't scratch your nose 5 minutes ago. So if you look at your hands, that reminds you, I'm in the present moment.
Oh,
There's nothing else. There's nothing else.
Sorry, waving at my daughter out the window.
With your hands.
Going, with my hands in the present moment. That's not going to make any sense to those of you listening on audio. It will do if you're watching the video. Right. Yeah. Okay. So look at your hands.
As a reminder that life is only ever happening now. And we're safe in the present moment. We're safe in the present moment. And the present moment is all there is.
Okay.
And I think 2's good enough.
Yeah, I think we've got a couple in the last one. I think the present moment is all that there is. I think that's so important to remember and to come back and to ground ourselves. And when you're thinking about experiences, what can you do to get the experience of the present moment, to be more there for other people, for yourself, for your family, all that sort of stuff.
And I think my 3rd thing then
you're
be,
sneaking in a third one.
I am.
Right, I'll let you have it. Go on.
Now that the listener has made it to the end of the podcast.
Well done, everyone. You made it sound like a challenge there.
Yeah, they've not switched off. What is this nonsense?
You're still here. Brilliant.
It's to go back and listen to it again. Seriously. Ooh. Because the stuff that we're talking about here, because change comes through insight, it doesn't come through doing stuff. Because change comes through insight, I can pretty much guarantee that anyone who's listened through to this podcast through to the end, there'll have been a little few things like that will have really got them thinking differently. Is to then go back to the beginning and listen to the whole thing again, because you'll hear a completely different podcast. So there you go. And it will do wonders for your listenership.
I was just thinking that get double the listening figures. Suddenly like
send my invoice
numbers.
In the post.
Oh, that is so good. Thank you. Because when we initially talked about this stuff, I was thinking, don't quite get it. I mean, I get the stuff about your thoughts, but I love the stuff about your default position is happy and it's at peace, and that takes a lot of the stress off it, doesn't it?
All of it.
I think sometimes we think our default position isn't. It's our default position is stress, but default position is peace, and that's good to know. That makes it an awful lot easier, doesn't it?
Yeah, less to do. I'm all for that. Yeah,
me too. Most definitely. Brilliant. Giles, thank you. That's been great. And we'd love to have you back again at some point.
Oh, I'd love to come back, yeah.
Talk about that. So if people wanted to contact you, how can they find you?
Yeah, I've got, I spend a lot of time on Facebook and Twitter. You can find me on Giles P Croft on both of those. My website, which is going through a change, but that's gilespcroft.com. I've also got a YouTube channel. Yeah, I've got tons of little videos on YouTube all about this stuff, which is Dr Giles P Croft again. Okay. Well, if you send me the link, I will put it in the show notes. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, and we'll speak again soon. Take care. Bye. Bye. Thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, then please share it with your friends and colleagues. Please subscribe to my You Are Not a Frog email list and subscribe to the podcast. And if you have enjoyed it, then please leave me a rating wherever you listen to your podcasts. So keep well, everyone. You're doing a great job. You got this.